Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast State of the Balance with me, your host, Imperial Dane, master of States of the Balances. And of course, there's been, some changes, I think, since last month. In a sense, there's been some shifts here in the metagame, how people perceive the game, how they perceive the units, and obviously I might take credit for at least one of those. But, overall, there's been some things happening here and there. Let's start with the Americans, which I think, changing actually surprisingly might be, again, the writing on the wall, or maybe some places just being fed up with the current state, which is increasingly, the same. So they're sort of exploring other venues, which is good because there will be changes there, I suspect. But overall, we're seeing more lieutenant play, we're seeing more M20s, air half track. Doctrinally, though, it's very much still heavy cavalry, armor, tactical support. A few are playing around with other doctrines, but so much, not really. That I think it's sort of making this a really huge impact. And there's also more players actually trying to make use, of the actual tech here, actually going for medium tanks rather than just relying on Pershings or Calliopes. And that's also, progress, and it all means you have to be a bit more careful about the Americans. So there's also a slightly more varying thing that snuck in. There's more American players sort of going for double mortars, which is quite unpleasant since it can very quickly wipe entire units if you're not really careful. Obviously, that's going to be ripped under them pretty, hopefully soon this year. They'll, of course, have to see how long that ultimately takes. But there's definitely some things going on there. And so, in terms of the Americans or what they need fixing, it's largely the same, Remove the veteran fee received accuracy bonus, change it into, a cheaper reinforcement cost bonus, so it doesn't become, hey, we're bulletproof, and more like, bleeding out there doesn't hurt you so much in the later game, which is really what they actually need. It's funny enough also what the Americans got in the old companies, one just through the supply depot there, where they sort of got it for upgrades, but here just for veterans here, I think would do a lot of the same for the Americans. All mean, they don't bleed out so brutally much, which is sort of actually the issue, not, their men not being bulletproof. It also makes, them more elite troops, more elite, since currently riflemen tend to beat them once they got double BAR'd up. So also just mechanized regiment, get some changes and remove some abilities, replace them with others, but also buff the half track there, since, well, it's not really that good. Again, it's too weak. It needs to be, tougher. It needs to be tough, otherwise it's not going to be of much use there. So that's definitely something there they need to look into. And also fix this one, the P-47 rocket strafe. That one could stand. I think to just be cheaper, actually. I don't think it needs to be better, it just needs to be cheaper. I think it would also fit more the American style a bit more, Cheap air support, but not necessarily the best, which was also rather hard was in the actual war. Not the best. So I think that sort of largely covers the Americans again, Also, the Steward, obviously, the Steward still needs to be nerfed. It's still overperforming. Though, again, there's less players going for it. So, again, who knows? But still, it needs to be nerfed in some measure. It's still, I feel, overperforming alongside the rifle and obviously the American mortar, which just needs to be hit with a cricket bat to both kneecaps. Specifically, it needs to be a lot less accurate. It needs to be shoot slower. It's just there to support, lay down smoke screens. It's not there to murder everything on its own. So, that needs to be looked into. But I think that sort of covers all with the Americans for now. Moving on, of course, we got the Soviets, the other really strong faction. At the same time, I think they're sort of a better place, but there's been a definite shift in the metagame. There's a lot more penal troopers. It used to be, maximum spam was, what all the cool guys did, quotation mark cool guys, actuality, bastards. But they're more now heading towards penal troopers. There's a lot more penal troopers here. A lot more pressure that way, and while them I can deal with the thanks to the MD4 choose the delayed MD34 for the Upper Command West and their reluctance towards using it does mean there's the Upper Command West, it's a lot more of a problem. And I'll probably, and Relic has also noted that our performance, there'll probably be a nerf there inbound, but overall it's still very much penal trooper based. There are some players that are sort of in terms of doctrines, moving away from guard motive, we're seeing a bit of shock rifle, a bit of counter-attack tactics, but obviously, partisans are also those, provide quick anti-tank support. They're also more tank hunter doctrine, actually, where some are sort of exploring more the doctrine and what it can do, though to what effect, though it's a bit harder to say there so far. But there's definitely something happening down there, making efforts towards making that one a bit more, how shall we say, useful. Again, though, I just think it's the penal troopers a bit the maxims they need a nerf, and the guardsmen also need some kind of slight nerf. I'm unsure of how to do the guardsmen. The penal troopers are, lowering the DPS a bit or making them a bit more vulnerable. For the guardsmen, though, it's a lot harder to say. I'm sort of aiming towards basically making the light machine gun and the PTRS sort of separate upgrades, and the light machine gun maybe get some other ability. and the PTS can still button up there. Because the problem is basically when they get both, they actually just have a lot of firepower because the PTS still works versus infantry. And I suppose we can still leave that a bit of that, but that does mean, need to, separate the two there in terms of what they can do. That way, lowering the overall firepower of the guard squad, make the PTS upgrade still a cheap one, and sort of, that way maybe give the guards then some suppression there with the DP light machine guns, though not too much either. I think that might, diversify the guard squad and overall sort of cut guard spam a bit there, sort of, but at the same time not by directly just nerfing them, but just, requiring a bit more from them. And I think that would overall work out pretty well. I might be wrong there, but it's not going to be just, making them useless, which is rather what we want to avoid. It's just going to be, less of a goddamn obvious choice if you want guardsmen. So I think that's more what we're aiming towards there. I also think the S-16 still needs a slight decrease in penetration. It's a high rate of fire, high range, it's cheap. It does need the penetration of that, though. It needs to be low there. It can even threat Panthers easily, and that's not really good. Again, that's what the S-35 buff was supposed to be about, but they don't need the S-35. They have the S-26, so for that to work, the S-26 does need lower penetration. It's still overall versatile. It just won't be, that versatile. But again, from the Soviets, expect penal troopers, get machine guns. And if you got Maxers, of course, get a bunch of infantry. But again, it's very much, about the penal troopers, so get machine guns. Finally, on the British side, it's largely the same there. I mean, there's a slight return to Bofors, advanced replacement, Sim Cities, but not too much. It's just armoured cars into Cromwells, Comets, the drill. Commandos, land mattresses. The land mattress, I think, just needs to be made more expensive at this stage, or maybe add a munitions course of firing its barrage, but just some kind of slight nerf. Otherwise, the British, I think, again, same what the American riflemen get, remove some of those received accuracy bonuses, replace them with cheaper reinforcement, stop making them, not need cover. That's stupid. Also, I think the commando drop-in from the commando doctrine could stand to, actually be able to deploy more commandos afterwards. Increasingly, it's just not good. It's 500 manpower for a single drop, and you can increasingly get, commandos on the way. So just having one for 500 manpower that can just be deployed once, I don't know. It doesn't increasingly strike me as not very practical. So I think, just being able to deploy more commandos from it would be good. Obviously, that means the Vanguard one would stand out a bit more in comparison. So, of course, the trick is, how do you do that one specifically? It's that or just make the glider itself cheap as well. I mean, just move down into the commando insertion drop as well, maybe a bit cheaper, because it is a bit more awkward and it's not quite exactly infiltrating. So maybe just make that one a bit cheaper. Overall, that could also, I think, do the trick. I mean, 400 manpower, 500 is what it costs. I think 400, or is this 440 the infiltration ones cost, and then make it slightly cheaper what the infiltration costs. I think, that should, I think, do the trick. Maybe actually having them at the same cost. At least that way, they'll be sort of more deployable than at 500 manpower, which, at the current stage is a bit much. So I think that's that, really. It's either that or they add an alert to like 4-man squads and then deploy 2 from it. Maybe increase the cost a bit to like, say, 560, in which case maybe, I don't know. But, something needs to be done there to make it more attractive, but not, make it, straight up better than, say, just Vanguard airdrop. So that one's going to be a bit more tricky to sort of figure out. Otherwise, again, for the British, I think it's just, get around to using your abilities. There's a lot of them just lazy, and again, it's partly because they can just, stand out in the bloody open with infantry, force them to use their abilities, which, again, requires them to force them to use cover for starters, I think. So, I mean, there's not really much else that needs to be done there for the British, except, fix that. Maybe the commando bit and all this, they just need to learn to use their doctrines. Again, it's very much just, not use their abilities, which are pretty much great, just use call-ins. And obviously, call-ins, reliance is still one of the bigger problems in the game, and overall, it needs to be looked at by Relic, Tie it to tech as much cases, except for infantry, but otherwise, tie it to tech. But I think that sort of covers it there. I mean, for the British, it's pretty much like the same stuff like the last few months, and holy moly, that was not very bright. And then, moving on to the Axis, Oberkommando West, there's been some changes there. Sturm pioneers are catching on, several of them, in fact, and using Panzerschrecks on them has suddenly become realized. That's actually not half bad. So, as an allied player, do keep, a watch out for that. Doctrinally, it's pretty much still scavenging when it doesn't necessarily make sense, which does mean they're neglecting other doctrines, but it does, of course, give them the Ostman, and the Ostman certainly has been increasingly catching on since people are realizing how to use it, perhaps thanks to a certain someone. I shall name no names, though I'm sure you know his very charming and Danish name, and Imperial, of course. So, I mean, that's rather, what's going on there. But at the same time, there's also more Panther play, which, of course, something the Allies have to be more watchful for. Of course, now I just need to learn how to use the Panther properly, and, of course, use orbital to support the Panther properly. But I was a lot of some of the same hang-ups still stick, not enough machine gun place when needed, still an over-reliance on Fultz grenadiers, and I think also an over-reliance on the Battle Group headquarters, bit of neglect on the mechanized regiment. But still, overall, they just need to work, on understanding the Schwerpanzer quarters, orbital, and, of course, using the Panther when it's necessary, the Panther 4 when that's necessary, and the Jagdpanzer when that's necessary. They're still just, I think, a too high tendency of just going for Panther 4, no matter the cost, when it doesn't even necessarily help them that much. Even go for the Panther, or neglecting the Panther when that can actually do quite a bit of good job, support it properly. So there's a bit, work there to be done. Overall for the Oberkommando S, though, I'm less sure there's something that needs to be done again. I think it's part, just the Allies overperforming, and I don't want to go, touching about with the Oberkommando S at the moment, except, just give them a bloody half-track and some smoke on the light infantry gun. Again, they're supposed, again, you be the sort of German army of the Ardennes. Give them bloody half-tracks, really. Just give them the 251. Simple as that. And, of course, buff the 251 for both the Oberkommando S and the Wehrmacht, because that one still needs a buff. It's still not quite there. It's close, but it still needs to, affect the battlefield more, and needs to be, a bit more bulletproof. And that finally gives us the Wehrmacht. Overall, Wehrmacht plays sort of, oriented towards things. There's still mechanized assault with Stug-E-Spam, and that needs to be fixed. Stug-E-Spam specifically, it's still way too cheesy, and in some cases way too effective. That one still needs to be looked into. End of story. Otherwise, it's a mix of lightning wars. Some goes for elite troops. Some goes, for Ostrom. I think there's some variety there. Again, there's sort of a mix now between tier 2 rushes, tier 1 play, which again can have some variations there. And again, Wehrmacht overall, because it struggles more, also tries to look for more options. So again, I think, Wehrmacht in a sense is good, but there's still some things that need to be changed. Against half-tracks, again, I think need to be a bit more better. And Wehrmacht tier 4 does need more specifically the Panther. Needs to make a stronger choice. It's still, too expensive for what, time it hits and what it does. So, I mean, it needs a bit more oomph. And increasingly, I'm also feeling like the Wehrmacht Panther 4 also needs a bit. I mean, you're better off going for Ostman to Stug at this point, so maybe just give it the Oberkommando West Panther 4 makeover. Just give it the Schützen from the start. Changes Vet 2 bonus being, more about accuracy and better turret rotation. And I think, that's going to be a lot more interesting choice. Maybe increase the cost just a bit. In response, like to maybe like 30 or 130 or something like that. Beyond that, though, I mean, again, it's more about, sort of sorting out the allies at the moment than just necessarily buffing the Axis to an extent. But again, it's very much, tier 4, half-track, maybe a bit the Panther 4 to make that a bit more, an actual, sensible choice. And maybe sneaking in some kind of elite unit, or at least some kind of upgrade for the infantry at tier 4 for the Wehrmacht. Just gain. I mean, Wehrmacht tier 4 does just need to be a bit more useful, so actually more of an actual choice to go for, rather than something at the moment where you're better off doing it while you got full pop cap and might as well prepare for it. It's less an actual goal to go for at the moment because it just does not quite have the impact it should have at that point. So that's something I think Relic needs to look at. And again, I think they'll also give them more choices for the allies. Again, they'll also force the allies, to respond with more different variations. Again, that's also the option. Again, there needs to be play and counterplay. And to force, counterplay, there needs to be, some kind of threat there. And that's a bit also what's lacking. So I think, though, that overall covers here the current state of the balance. Hopefully, there'll be a big, nice fat patch here in December. I'm really hoping for it. And hopefully, there'll be some news on it soon. So let's all hope for the best there, and I'll also be back, December 20th for the next, or 21st for the next state of the balance. So, see you all there. This is Imperial Dane signing off. Hopefully, this video has been enough use to you. If it has, subscribe, like, share, and comment on it. This is Imperial Dane signing off, and see you all another time. Cheers.